As you know, computer science is all about layers and weak coupling, and the design is good when you have a weak coupling. And this is exactly why we have decided to decouple the int domain implementation, so the domain abstraction, from the implementation of the sparse set itself. And the domain is an interface here. And as you can see, since it's an interface, we have no idea at all if it will be implemented using a sparse set internally or not. An interface doesn't specify any implementation there. What you can see is that we have all the usual methods that we need for querying a domain. You can do the minimum, retrieve the minimum, the maximum, the size, verify that the value is inside the domain, check that it's bound or not, and then you have the update operations. You can remove everything but a value, remove below, and remove all the values above a given value v. But we also have one very important functionality, which is the listening. We can listen to the updates of the domain. And so we have this listening mechanism that allows you to be notified whenever there is a change in the domain. And so this listener is, the interface of the listener is this one. Again, you can see that it's an interface. This listener will be notified if the internal set, so internal domain, becomes empty. If it becomes bind, it means that there is only one single value left inside the domain. If there is any change, you will also be notified with this method. If the minimum has changed and if the maximum has changed. Okay, so again, a domain is an interface. You have all these functionalities, which is a little bit more functionalities over the set and the sparse set in particular, because you have also this mechanism of being notified whenever there is a change inside the set. And then it's up to you to decide what you want to do with this change, but at least you can be notified with this change. Let's see one possible implementation of an integer domain that I will call the sparse set domain. Okay, and this is not very surprising as a name because internally I will use the sparse set that we just introduced before. Okay, and the sparse set domain will most of the time delegate all the changes that you want to apply on the domain to the sparse set itself that you have here internally. So let's take one example. If you want to query the minimum, I will ask to the sparse set what is the minimum. You ask me the size, I ask to the internal sparse set what is the size. But then you need to also implement the domain listener mechanism. And so you need to be careful with that. So if you want to remove a specific value from the domain, you have here the listener in argument. You need to notify correctly this listener according to the specification of the listener. So if the value v that you are about to remove is not in the domain, you don't need to do anything and you don't need to notify the listener itself. But otherwise, you might need to notify it. And so, in particular, before you do the effective removal to the sparse set, you will check if the maximum has changed or not. If the value that you want to remove was the same as the current maximum, then you will need to notify here the listener that the maximum has changed. Okay? And so, all these lines of code are there only to notify appropriately the listener. Otherwise, you will simply need to have this line, but all the other lines are there because you want to notify the listener appropriately. And this is very important because you can see that if we would have implemented all this notifier, this domain notifier functionality, and coupling it inside the sparse set implementation itself, the code will be quite unreadable. And so by decoupling the two functionality, we have a way to implement the domain differently. So if you remember, the domain is an interface. You could implement a bit set domain if you want by replacing the sparse set implementation using a bit set if you prefer. But in this case, the default implementation that we provide in MinCP is a sparse set domain to implement this interface of integer domain. In the next video, I will explain to you how we implement the variables. The variable is the next layer that we add on top that will make use of the sparse set domain.